In the next 5 minutes, my goal is to cure your anxiety about being the new engineer at a company. I've talked to hundreds of engineers through Taro, and I know that joining a new company can be extremely stressful. The onboarding period, usually the first 2 or 3 months at a company, is critical for learning. Learning not only the people, but also the technology to get stuff done. And you want to do it in a hurry. To achieve that, I've come up with something I call the Talk and Observe framework. I've also been able to apply this framework really effectively onboarding onto a new team or company in my time at Pinterest and Meta, both as an engineer and manager. But I didn't have the ability to articulate it in this way. Okay, let's start the 5-minute timer now. As the name implies, there are 2 parts to the Talk and Observe framework for onboarding. The first part is talking to people on the team. The second part, often overlooked, is about observing how people spend their time. And this is where I'll show you how to stalk your teammates effectively. Your goal when joining a new company is to quickly understand what people do. And unsurprisingly, talking to people directly is a very effective way of doing that. I recommend something called the Career Coldstar algorithm from Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta. In your first conversation with each colleague on the team, Bos recommends that you first ask about what information you need to know as a noob on the team. Next, you ask what are the biggest challenges that the team is facing. And third, you ask for who else on the team you should talk to. There are 2 important insights you'll get from talking to so many people when following this algorithm. First, you'll get an idea of the organizational priorities when the same challenges and projects come up repeatedly when you ask people what they're working on and what their biggest concern is. Second, you'll find that the same names come up repeatedly when you ask who else you should talk to. These people are the linchpins of the organization. They are not only trusted, but they're also powerful. And so they are likely going to be on the critical path of whatever you end up doing. You should make it a priority to talk to your colleagues. One benchmark I tell people is that you should aim to have at least 10 one-on-one conversations within the first 2 weeks of you joining a team or a company. And that list should at minimum include your direct manager, your skip level manager, and every person on your immediate team. The second part of the framework, Observe, is based on the premise that actions speak louder than words. And so while it's important to continue talking to people, it's also important to observe their actions and behavior. When I was at Meta, I got pretty good at this. And within a few minutes, I could stalk any random engineer at the company, and I could tell you with high confidence what they worked on, what their priorities were, and even how good of a performer were they. The beauty of software engineering is that we naturally create a bunch of artifacts of our work. And looking that up doesn't require permission from anyone, doesn't even require talking to anyone directly. Here's the data I recommend you look up for every engineer you work with. Number 1 is code contributions. How many pull requests are being submitted by this engineer in a given week, and how many lines of code does that translate into? On the flip side, how many comments does this engineer leave on other people's code review? The second category is design documents. At pretty much every company, there's going to be a design review process or architecture diagram before embarking on a large project. So look up what documents has this engineer authored or what have they contributed to. Third is Wiki Contributions. So again, pretty much every team or company is going to have a centralized knowledge base. Can you look up what edits or contributions have been made by this particular author? And the fourth category is the calendar. Many companies by default will have public calendars. And so what that means is for a particular engineer, I can look up how many meetings are they having in a given day or week, and who are they meeting with? There is a treasure trove of so much good intelligence that you can find with this investigation that I think people just don't really think about. First, an engineer's code is one of the fundamental markers of output and progress. And so when you look at the different people on the team and their code, is it really high volume, high churn, or is it really methodical and slow? When you look at code review, what is the culture? Is it a lot of comments, or is it a lot of just blind accept of code that people are writing? The second category is the engineer's contributions to design documents, to the centralized wiki, or to running experiments. This tells you a lot about what are their actual top priorities. There's so many things that you could be working on as an engineer, but they picked these particular things. Why? And the final category, looking at people's calendar, is a core question about how are you spending your time? And it also reveals norms around communication. So for a particular engineer, you can kind of figure out how plugged in are they? What initiatives are they taking part in? Who are they really talking to on a routine basis? Effectively, your goal is to stalk each employee that you work with to get a true understanding of their priorities, their time spent allocation, and what challenges they have. Once you understand the tooling at your company, this becomes extremely high leverage. Looking up the data for an employee and stalking them only should take 10 to 15 minutes per person. The benefits of doing this are immediate and deep. Number 1, since you know what everyone is working on, you can ask much more detailed and thoughtful questions when you're actually meeting with them. And when you're actually embarking on a project, it's really important to figure out how you can connect the dots between your work and the work of other people. And that's a really critical senior engineering trait to get buy-in and approvals from the people around you. Number 2, by understanding ongoing projects, you can start to identify opportunities or inefficiencies. For example, I might tell you that, oh, project A is super important to me. But when you look at all of my code contributions, it turns out that 80% of my work is going to do maintenance or bug fixing on project B. And that's an opportunity for you to diagnose why that is and maybe make a contribution. Number 3, and this is really important, is that you are able to onboard culturally by using this observation technique. Things like team meetings, code review, and launching a new product or an experiment for a feature, these are all things that really do depend on your team or your company. And you have to adapt to the norms of that culture. You can't just come in and steamroll everyone. You have to figure out how to work within the system. And this observation allows you to do exactly that. Okay, that's the framework. I hope it was helpful and we made it in time. To wrap up the video, I thought it would be helpful to demonstrate how I was able to apply this observation framework into my jobs at both Pinterest and at Meta, and I'll share an example from each. First, like so many other companies out there, Pinterest used Google Calendar for the scheduling tool for all employees. So by default, all events on the calendar were public unless you went in and changed it to be private, which pretty much no one did. So once I discovered this, it was astonishing how much information I could gather just by looking at people's calendar. For example, I could look at engineers who I really respected and figure out where was their allocation of time. Was it between one-on-one meetings, team meetings, focus time for coding, or other things? And I could just model my behavior off of that. But what occasionally happened is I would discover through looking at people's calendar that they were invited to some team meeting that I was interested in, and I would ask them, or I would do some research internally about what was that new initiative that they were invited to, and was there an opportunity for me to get involved, or just at least have an awareness of what people were thinking about. Next, I'll share an example of how I was able to do this observation technique at Facebook, which is the most recent company I was part of. Facebook uses a tool called Fabricator for code review, and so it was really easy to plug in an author and figure out all the diffs, all the code changes that it has submitted, and also look at what comments did this person leave on other people's code review. And typically the more senior someone is, the more commentary, the more opinions they have on other people's code. And in fact, there was even a tool called Team Insights where you could actually have a holistic view and a comparison of different engineers in a team or org, where you could go in and you could see how does this engineer's code contributions, lines of code, comments compared to other people on their immediate team. And that was really good intel just to kind of benchmark how was I doing relative to people. And of course, code is not the be-all end-all marker of productivity, but at least it's one data point that you should know about as you are progressing in your career. The combination of simultaneously talking to your new teammates and observing their behavior sets you up for onboarding success. The Talk and Observe framework lets you build relationships quickly while also understanding your team's unique culture. There is, of course, a bunch of nuance when it comes to onboarding. I spent almost 100 hours packaging up practical wisdom like Talk and Observe into the complete onboarding guide for software engineers. I'll leave a link for it in the description. I've talked to hundreds of engineers on Taro who have gone through the course, and they've told me that it transformed their first few months on the job, taking them from anxiety to confidence and allowing them to create impact much faster. If you're starting in a new team or a new company, I'd love for you to check it out and let me know how it goes. And check out this video where a VP of engineering explains how a mid-level engineer went to principal engineer in 4 years. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.